Hey y'all. Today I wanted to go over a few different things. Well, I think I've got like 10. I wrote them all down because I was writing, and a lot of things like came to my head of things that like were said during my depression that weren't so helpful, and I don't think anybody said these things to be malicious, and I don't think when people are saying these things they really know what they're saying. And to be quite honest, before I suffered with my own depression, I probably had said this to people that were going through their depression. And so, going through your own stuff definitely wakes you up to situations you may not have been familiar with before. And throughout my own personal journey, I tend to learn the greatest lessons when I go through it myself. And I think I know before, but like I really don't know unless I've experienced it. And so, these are kind of some statements that I heard and that I think are not the best ways to approach depression, that I feel strongly about, and that there's better alternatives to what you could say. So the first one I would hear a lot is, why are you so depressed? And that can be like a really open-ended question. And ultimately, you got to be careful asking that question, especially to somebody who's depressed. Most people don't know how to listen without somehow taking it personal. That's one thing I've experienced, because they internalize it and they're like, well, what about me? Because naturally, as humans, we're all selfish, so we all make everything about us. Or we're taking on the other person's depression, or feeling like you should be able to fix it. That's a big one, especially for loved ones, is they're like, oh, well, I got to fix it. Because instantly, as a loved one or a friend, we want to be able to fix it, but the reality is that we don't have what it takes to fix it. We can be there as a support system, but like we can't fix it by ourselves. We just can't. We don't have what it takes most of the time. Or not having enough time to listen after you've asked this question. I think that maybe depression isn't seen as serious as it really is. And so somebody will say, oh, why are you so depressed? But then say, oh, I got to go somewhere when they're getting into the details. So, I think that, yes, it's okay to be supportive to somebody. But I also think it's really important in how you approach it. And maybe, being prepared to give that time to them if you're going to ask that question, and being prepared to listen to their truth. And then maybe saying, hey, how would you like for me to support you? And the person who's depressed isn't always going to have that answer. So, but putting the ball back in their court so that they don't feel threatened. And I'm not saying that you can help if they feel threatened anyways, but like I definitely feel like there's a better way to approach it, how it can come from a more supportive place versus and I'm not saying when you ask that question it's not supportive. It can be a loaded question, and it can have a lot of different things that come from it. So here's a big one. This is one that I hear a lot. You have everything in your life, and your life is so full. What do you have to be depressed about? And let me tell you what, there's nothing more that spins me out than that one. Because for me, I'm already laying in the bed depressed, thinking about everything great in my life. And why do I deserve that? So I've already got these messages going on in my head of not feeling like I actually deserve it when I'm in a depression or feeling crappy about myself. So when somebody asks that, it tells me that since I have everything in my life, there's no reason why I should be upset. And so I think that goes into what society does these days, is that this thing, that gift, that car, that house, those people, that's all gonna make you feel better when it's an inside job. Is that we're constantly throwing people, places, and things at a problem and not actually addressing the internal battle that's going on. So therefore people aren't actually addressing the issue because we're just covering it up, and we're making it about these superficial things that don't matter, when it's all an inside job, and it's not about the things that you have, because if it were, then so many more people would be happy. And I would just avoid that question in general. And like I said, it just reinforces the guilt and shame that they shouldn't feel that way. And it's ultimately not about what you have. There's a lot of famous people in the world that have had everything and have still felt the need to either commit suicide, be in a depression, for whatever reason. It really, you could have everything in the world and still be broken inside. And ultimately those people have felt the need to take their own life. So it really is hard to say sometimes what the reasoning is for somebody's depression and or suicide. And at that point, it's better to talk to a doctor, a therapist, or a psychiatrist, or at that point, you need to get some more help. If you need answers to why somebody's depressed, so on and so forth. So I don't really like reading off of something, but I knew I wouldn't be able to remember this, so that's why I'm bringing it up. Let's see. So number 3, this is one that I would say to myself a lot. Nobody ever really said this to me, but you know how to provide solution to everyone else. Why can't you provide solution to yourself? So the majority of my depression, that thought plagued me daily, was like, I am helping other people fix their life, not fix, let me rewind on that word. I am helping other people gain tools to build not new habits, but new coping skills to be able to go through life, to do the emotional work. Why can I not seem to implement those tools, and I cannot get out of bed and I cannot get out of my head? And so, it happened more and more. And it was like an everyday thing for me that I continued to hear this and I continued to beat myself up throughout it because I'm like, I shouldn't be having these feelings. So, I kind of held myself to a standard that wasn't real, because just because I help people doesn't mean that I'm not allowed to struggle. And I had created this imaginary life where I wasn't going to struggle, even though I know that's not real. Like, it doesn't even sound right. But I know logically that like I'm going to have problems, but it was really hard for me to connect to that going through all that because I continued to go over and over and over in my head of why I should have these tools, but I was still coming up empty-handed. And I just didn't have what it took to fix myself. I have what it takes to go seek help and somebody else helping me learn the tools to then implement them in my life. But like, I myself don't have what it takes to fix Aaron. And yes, I am my own solution, but like, it is okay for you to have a job where you're helping people, or you're doing something in your life where like you are counted on by people. It's okay for you to struggle. And it took me a while to really give myself permission to be able to struggle. And it's still hard daily. It's really hard to realize that like I'm not perfect, and just because I help other people doesn't mean I'm not going to struggle and or not have the answers when my struggle arises. So number 4, can't you just be happy for your husband, your kids, your friends, and your family? If only we could. But what I experienced during my depression and what I've heard from many other people is that just makes the shame and the guilt come up again. And again, I'm not saying tiptoe around somebody who's got depression because I don't know how effective that is sometimes. But I think it's not what you say, it's how you say it. Well, I think it is what you say. But anyways, I just believe that there's a better way that things can be said. And ultimately, that goes back to a person, place, thing is not going to fix the insides. And yet again, that's throwing something or someone at a problem, hoping that it's going to fix it when the problem has to be worked out. Like, the problem has to be figured out and worked out, and someone or something isn't going to fix it. Yes, is my husband and my kids a motivator to want to be better? Of course it is. But the reality is that when you have the weight of your thoughts on you and you're suffering from clinical depression, like it is so much bigger than that. I wish that it was enough because I could have gotten out of the bed sooner, and many other people could get out of the bed sooner, get out of their depression, or potentially not commit suicide. It's just not that simple. It's so not that simple. I wish it was. And there's a lot more to that, but that's as much as I'll do for now. 5, can't you just suck it up and feel better? And this normally feels to me more about the person who's talking to the person who's depressed, and I know that it can be aggravating and frustrating to be around somebody who has depression and or suffering from mental health issues. I can imagine it's extremely frustrating. Before I suffered with it at this extent, I would get really frustrated with people. I didn't understand it. I didn't understand why they were so unhappy, why they couldn't just suck it up and get it together. And since going through this, it's like an insert foot and mouth moment where it's like, oh, it's just not that way. It's not that way, and it takes so much more than just sucking it up and getting it together. So let's see. This doesn't necessarily have to do, well, this doesn't have to do with me, but this has to do with like everybody. And I hear this often with friends who are not in recovery, who will say this about one of their friends who's suffering. Let's go out for drinks. That will make you feel better. It won't help, first of all, because alcohol is a depressant. It's only going to intensify your symptoms. And this seems to be confusing for most. And this goes for a lot of people who aren't in recovery, and maybe even before you got in recovery, this is something you heard. Maybe this is something that sped your addiction and alcoholism up because you were constantly medicating with alcohol to fix the internal battle that was going on. So like maybe that's what jump started your addiction and or alcoholism, was trying to medicate the depression. So yet again, this is us throwing something at an issue when we've got to be able to find out what the issue is, and something or someone isn't going to be able to put a Band-Aid over it. 7, you don't look depressed. Can't tell you how many times I heard that specific comment. And my initial thought was, okay, well, first of all, I'm fooling everybody. Because if they only knew what it looked like on the inside, like if that showed on the outside, I mean, people would definitely know it, but also it's really easy when you're in a depression and people only see what they want to see on social media, or they only see you one time a year, or they only see what they think is your reality. Like, I'm really good at posting great pics on Facebook. Meanwhile, on the other end of the camera, I'm dying. I'm dying inside because I feel lost, I feel alone, I feel unworthy, I feel like I don't deserve the life that I have or the love that I have, or I'm a screw up, I'm a fraud, I'm a fake, I'm a phony, and that people really don't love me and none of this is real. So like there's some like pretty hardcore messages that I hear, and I know a lot of people with depression hear, and when they hear you don't look depressed, I don't know, I just hear that and I don't really understand it, and I'm really good at covering up the outside because sometimes that's all I've got. Sometimes getting ready is the only thing I've got to get out of bed and get it together. And that's really what's inspired me to continue with these blog posts, is so that I'm able to be authentic. And even though I come on with a face full of makeup and a cute outfit, the reality is like, it's important for me to speak my truth so that people know that like sometimes the insides don't match the outsides, but I think it's important for us to be able to vocalize that. I don't think I have to look like I haven't showered in a week or I've been in the bed for 2 weeks. I don't think I necessarily have to look that way to be struggling inside. And so my goal is to be more transparent with where I'm at, because I just think that it starts to break the stigma of what somebody who's depressed looks like, and or how they should look, how they should respond and act. And so that's really the point of all of this. ending on the you don't look depressed. And I kind of went into that in the last video. So 8, happiness is a choice. It's really crazy going through all of this right now because if I'm being completely honest, before I suffered with the depression at the extent that I did, I kind of snubbed my nose up to depression like, happiness is a choice. You're choosing to be miserable. And hearing it now, it's like I wish that it was a choice. I do think that can be a double-edged sword too. I think that if you do have solutions in place and you're seeing a doctor and you're getting the help that you need, there is a point where you're going to have to implement those tools because they're not going to magically happen overnight. Medication is not going to magically fix it. And it's just not going to. And the next one, which will tie into that, is, have you taken your meds today? That seems heavy to hear that as somebody with depression when maybe you're having trouble getting out of bed that day, or you're having trouble showering, or you're having trouble communicating and you're isolating. And somebody's like, well, have you taken your meds today? It's just very demeaning. It's very disheartening to hear that, because what it implies, what I hear, is that I'm not okay without my meds, and clearly my response or what I'm doing is seen by everybody. They see me for, I mean, it's just this whole, I don't even know how to explain it really. It just sucks to hear that, because I don't know, maybe it's the realization as a person with depression that you are having to take medication, or that, you know, somebody sees you for really where you're at, and maybe you are not playing it off as well as you thought, or maybe it implies that like you're not okay the way that you are and you need to take your medication because it's going to fix it all, and it just doesn't. And it doesn't feel supportive hearing it. It just doesn't feel supportive. There's a way that you can say it. Hey, how are your meds working out? What's going on? Because have you taken your meds today? Sounds more about the person saying it, or it says more about the person saying it than actually the person with the depression. Because let's be real, depression, anxiety, any sort of mental health issue provokes, I don't think people mean for it to, but like it will provoke the person who loves you going through depression, because they don't know how to handle it. They don't know how to deal with it. It pisses them off that maybe they're having to take all the responsibility in the house. I know during my depression, I don't know how I would have been able to show up if Justin wasn't around. I know he probably got frustrated because all the responsibility was on his shoulders. I didn't feel capable of getting up to take my children to school. I didn't feel good enough. I didn't feel like I was capable of doing anything, because really I just wanted to lay in that bed and never get up. And that is what it feels like when you're going through a depression, is that you sink lower and lower and lower into that depression, and it's extremely challenging to get out of it. And in another video, I'll go into detail about my personal experience with depression, how it started and what it was like during it, because I think it would be really informative for, you know, people who have loved ones suffering from depression, but also so that people with depression are able to relate, and we're able to connect on that level that like, I hear you, I see you, and I feel you, and I understand, and I know it's hard. So we went over the have you taken your meds, and then the last one is you have too many responsibilities to be depressed. So let's not be mistaken here that anybody who's depressed knows what all of their responsibilities are, because they've continued to replay them over and over and over and over again in their head, of how they're not in a position to actually follow through with their commitments, and then they'll spin that out in their head, or they're so depressed that they literally can't even think of anything because they're just so depressed. They're so sad and not able to even process any sort of responsibility or have any idea of who they are or who they were. And for me, it's not like addiction or recovery. It was so much different. Like, yes, they're similar, but it was so different. And so I kind of feel like I felt in early recovery is that I felt like I still had so much to learn about depression, that like, yes, I have gotten over a large hump or slump, I should say, with the most recent depression that I had, and I'm kind of in an upswing. I'm feeling better. Yes, I feel the depression to creep back in, but I've, starting to get the help that I need to be able to address those issues, and I'm in the middle of getting and seeking that type of help to address those issues. But that doesn't mean it's going to fix it all. Like, I have to implement what I'm learning and be honest and open about what is going on internally and the battle that I'm facing each day to sometimes even get out of bed, to sometimes even shower, to sometimes pull it together. And honestly, recently, over the last week, like, having to do the vlogs has been like my reason to like get up and show up, that like I had to get up and I had to communicate and I have to talk about what's going on or what's on my heart, because I know that somebody out there with, I may not know who I'm connecting with when I'm doing the video, but the messages that I receive after from people lets me know that I'm connecting with somebody. Even if it's them telling me that they're broken and they're struggling and they don't know what to do and they feel lost and alone and like there's no way out of what they're going through, like, then that makes all of this worth it. And that gives me reason and that gives me purpose, which in return starts to help me rebuild, I don't even know what I would say, to help me rebuild the emotional strength that I feel like I lost throughout the depression journey. And maybe I didn't lose it. It's just a new level of like emotions that I hadn't really experienced before in a way that like I couldn't really pick apart or explain, which of course I get served a big fat reality check of like, hey, Erin, you don't know shit. Like, that's kind of how it works for me. And that's how I felt with depression, is that I'm seeing it through a new lens. It's just a lot different than anything I've ever experienced before. And I just really feel passionate about being able to connect with other people out there, because there's so many people out there that are suffering from depression, that are suffering from anxiety, worry, being a loved one or of an addict or somebody suffering with depression or mental health issues. Like, I just don't want us to feel like we have to suffer in silence anymore, because it's so lonely that way. It's like we have an infinite amount of access to connect with people. So like, I really want to empower myself and other people that like, let's use this as a place where we can connect with other people so that we know we're not alone. And so, I just believe that like we were put here to connect, but all these barriers are in the way. And yes, some of the barriers we've put there ourselves, but like, I feel like social media is a platform that could and can and does impact and change the way that people live their lives for the better, rather than impacting people's lives in a way that's making their life worse. I just feel like we have such a powerful tool right at our fingertips, but we have to be the change that we want to see. And I know that's really cliche, be the change you want to see, but it's like, y'all, this is a powerful, powerful tool that like could really change the way things work in this world. And I'm a big thinker, I've said that before, but like I believe in that. I believe that it doesn't have to be as negative as it is, and that there's no reason anybody should be suffering in silence with all the tools we have to connect. It's just a matter of us getting out of our comfort zone, stop making it all about us, and just reaching our hand out. Even if we reach out and say, hey, I'm not doing good today, or hey, how are you doing? Even if you don't have the solution for them, but like human connection is what it's about. So anyways, I know this was a long video. Well, it's actually short because I cut them in two. But I hope everybody has a fantastic day, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Take care.